Welcome back to Murder on Record, where every case is etched in blood and the truth is buried in the fine print. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we dig through the dusty files, the overlooked evidence, and the whispered testimonies to bring long-forgotten crimes back into the light. Today, we're diving into a really troubling case. It's the 2007 murder of University of Arizona freshman Mia Henderson by her roommate, Galareka Harrison.
Yeah, it's a deeply unsettling one. What really grabs you, I think, is how it seems to come out of nowhere extreme violence between these two young women they'd basically just met.
Exactly. And then there's this layer of, evidence that suggests some pretty disturbing planning went into it. It just raises so many questions, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. So for this deep dive, we've pulled together information from various news reports, court records, and also the Murderpedia page.
Right. And it's worth mentioning Murderpedia is a starting point, but sometimes lacks the full picture. So we've definitely layered in other sources.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Our goal here is really to piece together the known facts, but also importantly, to look closely at the things we don't fully understand about what happened, maybe explore some potential underlying issues.
Okay. So we're focusing on Mia Henderson, the victim, obviously, and Galareka Harrison, the perpetrator, and trying to get a sense of the context, the legal side too, the evidence that's crucial here.
Definitely. So let's set the scene. It's early September 2007, University of Arizona.
Right.
We have Mia Henderson, she's 18, from Tuba City, and Galareka Harrison, 19, from Chinle. Both students, both from the Navajo Nation. And they were signed as roommates. Just met.
And trouble started pretty much immediately.
Almost right away, yeah. Within just a few days, Harrison accuses Henderson of stealing from her.
And do we know if that was true? Did she actually steal anything?
Well, that's a key point. The sources we have, they don't confirm it. There's no proof presented that Mia actually stole anything. But the accusation itself, that clearly created tension right from the start.
Yeah, you can imagine. And a new environment, new roommate. An accusation like that, true or not, is going to cause friction. Big time.
Definitely. You have to wonder how much that initial incident, even if it's based on nothing, sort of poisoned the well between them. Was it the spark?
A potential catalyst, maybe.
What?
So things are tense. Then what happens in the days leading up to the actual event?
So on September 1st, Harrison takes a trip back home to Chinle, comes back with a friend. But it's September 4th, the day before the murder, where things get, really concerning in terms of plan.
Okay, what happened on the 4th?
On that day, she goes to Target and buys an 8-inch knife.
An 8-inch knife.
Yes. And her explanation, she apparently said it was for a class.
For a class, an 8-inch knife.
Yeah.
That sounds pretty thin looking back.
Extremely thin. Especially given what happened next. Buying a weapon like that just the day before.
Huh.
It really points towards intent, doesn't it?
It really does. And wasn't that the only thing that day? Didn't she do something else that suggested planning?
Yes, absolutely. Later that same day, September 4th, she apparently spent hours at the university library.
Doing what?
Composing a fake suicide note. And this is critical. It wasn't just a note. It was written as if Mia Henderson wrote it.
Wow. So pretending to be Mia, what did it say?
According to the reports, the note basically said something like, "I've been stealing from my roommate. I can't live with myself."
Oh, that's incredibly calculating.
Yeah.
Trying to create a false narrative for why Mia might be dead.
Precisely. It suggests a deliberate attempt to cover her tracks and mislead anyone investigating. It's chillingly methodical.
Almost like scripting the aftermath. And didn't she also do some research around that time? Something about fingerprints?
Yes, that's another piece. Reportedly, in the days leading up, Harrison had looked into fingerprint detection. And there was also some mention, apparently she told someone about a friend considering suicide a few days prior.
A friend considering suicide.
Yeah. So you put it all together, buying the knife, crafting that incredibly specific fake note, the research into fingerprints. It paints a pretty strong picture of premeditation. It makes you really question how much of this was planned out.
Okay, so we have this backdrop of apparent planning. Then we get to the morning of September 5th. What actually happened in the dorm room?
It happened early, around 6 a.m. Mia Henderson was asleep in her bed, and she was attacked brutally.
How bad was it?
The autopsy later showed Mia had been stabbed 23 times.
23 times. That's just horrific. The level of violence is hard to grasp.
It really is. It speaks to a level of rage or something intense happening in that moment.
What happened right after?
Well, both women ended up being taken to the hospital. But tragically, Mia's injuries were too severe. She was pronounced dead on arrival.
Such a waste. Just starting university. So the legal process kicks in. Harrison initially pleads not guilty, right?
Yeah.
Around September 20th.
That's right. Not guilty initially. But the prosecution, they had a fairly strong case, focusing heavily on that premeditation angle we've been discussing.
So the knife was obviously key evidence.
The knife, definitely. Physical evidence linking her directly. But arguably, that forged suicide note was perhaps even more powerful for the jury.
You think? Why specifically the note?
Well, reports suggest the jurors found it really critical, the fact that she went to such lengths, spent hours writing this elaborate deception. It strongly countered any idea that this was, a sudden impulsive act. It screamed planning.
Right. It shows a state of mind before the event. Hard to argue it was spontaneous when you've written a fake suicide note for the victim. What did the defense argue? Was there a counter-narrative?
They did raise the possibility of self-defense.
Self-defense against someone sleeping.
Well, that's the difficulty. The available records, apparently key details about any injuries Harrison herself might have sustained, those details were redacted, blacked out.
Ah. So without proof she was injured herself.
Exactly. It made the self-defense claim really difficult to support convincingly. If you can't show you were fighting for your life, it's a hard argument to make stick, especially given the number of wounds Mia suffered.
Okay. So the jury hears about the knife, the note, the research, versus a self-defense claim without much backing evidence. How did they rule?
They found her guilty of first-degree murder. And reportedly, the deliberation wasn't actually that long. Happened in September 2008.
Suggests the evidence felt pretty clear-cut to them.
It seems that way.
And sentencing followed soon after, in November 2008.
Yes. She received a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Life without parole. Was the death penalty ever on the table?
It wasn't pursued. Now, the sources don't give a definitive reason why not. It could be related to her age, she was only 19, or potentially considerations related to her being part of the Navajo Nation might have played a role, though that's speculation based on some source suggestions.
Interesting. And that life sentence stuck. It was appealed.
It was appealed, yes, but the life sentence was upheld. So legally, the case is closed.
But even with a conviction and sentence, it feels like there are still loose ends. Things that don't feel fully resolved.
Oh, absolutely. Big questions remain. One of the major ones is Harrison's mental state at the time.
Was that explored? Her mental health?
Not in great detail in the records we have access to. There isn't a clear, comprehensive picture of her psychological condition leading up to the crime. And that lack of insight, it leaves a huge gap in understanding why. Was there an underlying illness? We just don't have a solid answer from these sources.
Right. And that initial spark, the theft accusation, did we ever find out if there was any truth to it?
Still unclear. No evidence presented either way, as far as we know. It could have been real, a misunderstanding, or maybe even Harrison fabricating it to justify something else. We just don't know. But you wonder how significant that tiny detail might actually be.
Yeah. And then there's the broader context. You mentioned both young women were from the Navajo Nation. Starting university, often a predominantly white institution, could that transition, those pressures, have played any part?
That's a really important layer, I think. Starting university is stressful for anyone. For Indigenous students entering environments that might feel culturally very different, there can be unique stresses, feelings of isolation, adjustment challenges. Now, we can't draw a direct line from that to the murder based on what we know. That would be irresponsible speculation. But it's part of the backdrop. Were there adequate support systems? Were there cultural misunderstandings at play? It makes you think about the challenges these young women might have been facing beyond just being roommates.
The sources we looked at also raise a few other points, sort of areas for further thought, like the contrast between the planning and the violence itself.
Right. That's fascinating, isn't it? You have this meticulous planning, the knife, the note, the research. Very deliberate.
Seems controlled, almost.
Yes. But then you have the actual attack. 23 stab wounds. That sounds like crazy. Frenzy, loss of control, intense emotion. How do those two things coexist? The cold planning and the apparent heat of the moment. It's a psychological puzzle.
It really is. And the sources also mention the Navajo Nation's perspective, how the community responded.
Yeah, the impact on their community must have been immense. Two of their own young people.
It highlights how this wasn't just a campus crime. It was a tragedy deeply felt within their nation. Understanding how they supported both families, how they processed it, that adds another dimension.
And finally, the whole issue of dorm safety. Roommate conflicts.
Yeah.
Are there lessons here for universities?
You have to ask, right, how are roommate conflicts handled? Are there warning signs that get missed? Could better intervention or support systems potentially prevent something like this, or at least de-escalate situations sooner? It's a sobering reminder for institutions about student safety and well-being. So looking back at this whole case, It just leaves you feeling deeply uneasy. The level of calculation involved beforehand, the sheer brutality of the crime itself, and then all these unanswered questions about motive, about her mental state, the context. It's just profoundly disturbing.
It really is. The legal side is settled, but the human side, the why, it's still very murky. You're left thinking about the psychology, the personal dynamics, maybe even those broader cultural factors we touched on. It shows how even when you have a conviction, the full story can remain elusive, hidden beneath the surface.
Until next time, stay curious and keep your eyes on the evidence.